Our esteemed colleagues here, Amelia and I, were both in Brussels giving a talk about 6 months ago, and she can tell you how different this talk is going to be from the last one. It's always a challenge when somebody else has heard you once before using the same kind of overhead transparencies. As I said, my job is owning a publishing company, and with that comes a different kind of responsibility than working for a publishing company. And I was asked to be provocative and be brief, so I'll do my best to do both of those things. I want to begin by saying what I said in Brussels and state that I'm an amateur publisher. Some of you have been trained to be publishers. I have staff who have master's degrees in publishing. I came into publishing from school days when I did the school magazine, and that has stayed with me. And when I was about 10, come 11, we took pieces of paper like those pieces of paper there, bigger ones, and I produced this school magazine on one sheet of paper and pasted it on the wall of the entrance of the school. And the kids came and read that. That's my experience of coming into it. The technology was very simple. It was a brown sheet of paper. I was using fountain pen to write it. My spelling was very poor, and my grammar wasn't much better. And the kids would cut pieces of paper with the correct spelling and put it on top of my mistakes. I even once noticed a teacher did that, correcting my spelling mistakes. And the other thing, which was interesting, was that the kids would write graffiti alongside the piece of paper. And at the beginning, I would fill all my paper, and then I discovered that I needed space for other kids to put their stuff. So I had a large margin of white space, so people could write their replies and their root words and the rest in there. That has stayed with me. If you look at any of the Intellect publications, we still have that sense of wide, white margins. That's one of the things that sort of is always there. We don't try and cram everything. And then I came to this country to study at the University of Essex, doing a computer science degree. And the first thing I did was I went to the student union and said, I'd love to be able to take part in the school magazine project, university magazine project. Now, my English is not very great, but I can do layout, etc. And discovered that they had a litho press in the basement of the student union that they used to produce the student university magazine. And that was in the 70s, and the university unions wanted to have the independence of having their own press, so quickly they could churn out a flyer or whatever. And I was involved in producing a university magazine, which was A4 folded, and we printed about 3,000 copies of it and gave it to every single individual student. The reason I'm telling you this story because it's significant for me. The earlier one that I had started at school, I had to bring the students to the newspaper. It was a kind of technology that it was a pull technology. I had to bring the kids to there. But on the other hand, when they wrote something on there, they all shared that annotation. When I went to university and we produced this very lovely magazine and we gave everybody their own copy, we gave it to them. They didn't need to come to the magazine. They could bin it if they wanted to, and they could annotate it, but the annotations were not shared between readers. And I'll come back to that when I talk about the new technology. So those are the first two sets of activities. And then I came to set up Intellect. And Intellect's technology is quite different to both of those two. Intellect, I'm sorry, I'm going to advertise, but it's not really meant to. Intellect published this year 19 new journals. We launched 19 new journals. John Cox did a research project discovering how many new journals are launched every year by all university presses and others, esteemed presses like Oxford and Cambridge. About 185 new journals are launched every year. So we launch about 10% of those journals for a very small, privately owned company. And that's quite a challenge. The only reason that we are able to do that is because we use digital printing, and I'll come back to that, And we really benefit from the process of putting all of that on PDFs and allowing those things to be disseminated, aggregated, and I'll come back to that too. So we are beneficiaries of the digital revolution, which has allowed us to publish a large number of very narrow bandwidth journals that otherwise would have not had the audience if they had to be printed in large numbers, distributed, etc. So that's a little bit of history. You've got the slides in your pack. I've added a couple of slides new last night, and I'll point them out to you. Now, what about, I was going to say today's technology, and the next slide, tomorrow's technology. I decided to call this yesterday's technology. Because Chris Anderson, if you know Chris Anderson, the editor of Wired, has written a wonderful article, which is also reprinted in this month's UK edition of Wired, which basically says the web is dead. And I think you really need to take note of that. Then we talk about companion websites for books. The web is genuinely dead. It'll take a while for people to understand that and the implications of that, including the publishers. But well and truly, the web is dead. 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 is all gone. Only about half of internet traffic is web-based right now, and it's going to diminish gradually as we go along. And we need to take note of that as publishers. But the web was a very important thing. It impacted on academic publishing quite a lot. I would argue not significantly in reality. It was froth on top, etc. What I think has impacted academic publishing dramatically is online search. Be it Google, be it whatever you want. Being able to search in that a very easy way is significant. And people do more of that. People's relationship with academic publishing is now mediated through search, and the keywords play a role. It would have been very difficult to do that search on paper-based stuff, etc. Believe it or not, I think the biggest thing I've seen my students, at least at the university, do is copy and paste. It's brilliant. Just copy and paste. Makes life so much easier. That's been the biggest use of it after search in my university. I only wish there was, and I'll come back to that at the end, an intelligent kind of copy and paste. You know why? Because they copy and paste, put it in the article, they forget to get the bibliography detail. And then 6 months later, 8 months later, a year later, they want to do their PhD, they can't remember where they got that copy text from. So one of the things that maybe we could do as new technology is have an intelligent copy and paste. When you copy from somewhere, they'll have at the background the data, the metadata, where you got it from, and then later on when you stick it in there, it'll automatically put in the bibliography and make the connection. So there's a lot we can do, massive amount of things we could do. But a simple, rudimentary copy and paste has had a fantastic impact on my own students' work. One of the things that people don't mention, but as a publisher I think is fantastic, is Crossref. It's a product that allows connections between articles across different publishing companies. Brilliant, fantastic, very cheap. We pay a tiny bit of money, about $700 a month, to Crossref. They connect all of these up, and as long as everyone's in Crossref, when you come to the bibliography, you can click it and you're there. If you have access, brilliant, just fantastic. Then we come to other things. I forgot to add in here, because it's not the technology, open access, by the way. That's another major thing, that you can actually have articles published for nothing, as long as you have a pharmaceutical industry behind you who pays the bills, and as long as you have a legal industry who pays the bills, etc. That's supposed to be one of the big impacts of the technology that can shift the business model of an industry. In our case, hasn't. We have had optional open access at Intellect. Instead of the $3,000 that Sage and Oxford and Cambridge, I'm sure, charge per article to make it available, we charge $1,000, £750, because our community is the art and design community, and they are much more impoverished. Even at that rate, not a single person has taken it up. I read details about Oxford's take-up is actually going down from very, very, very small single-digit numbers to even smaller single-digit numbers. Wait till the negative ones come in, can I have my money back? Sort of thing. But what, so that open access hasn't actually impacted. It's a worry for a publisher, by the way, in that, especially for me as an owner of a publishing company. It's a different relationship. Hasn't had any impact at all on intellect business model. I thought institutional repositories would do the trick. They take the rug from underneath our feet. You know, what if all the academics who publish in journals could put their articles in their university's repository, and people would just go there and read it on the repositories for free? Where's my revenue source at Intellect? Hasn't had a single significant type of impact on my business. I allow all our authors to put their articles on their own university repositories. In fact, we encourage them, we actually tell them, please, while you're at it, put your Word file on your institutional repository, because it would act as a marketing tool to bring people to the PDFs that I put on our site, and you've got to pay $18 to read it, because I've added copy editing, I've added page design, and all that, not to mention peer review. That hasn't really made an impact on our business model. What, as I mentioned before, has had the dramatic impact on our business model is digital printing, which is not digital publishing, but actually is massive for Intellect. What has allowed us is it's allowed us to print a journal, 50 copies of it, 20 copies of it, and have reprints at a drop of a hat, which wouldn't have been possible. I remember I launched a journal, I do not mention names, a journal that had 7 subscribers in year 1. At the time, a lithopress was the only option I had. And the printer would not print any less than 1,000 copies, because he said, by the time I press the button to print it and take my hand off it, 1,000 copies come through. So I was printing 1,000 copies of this journal. I only had 7 subscribers. The garage of our house was full of these back issues of it. And then we moved, we just got a skip and threw everything in the skip. It was not possible to have what Chris Anderson calls the long tail of publishing, which is what basically Intellect is. We go where nobody else wants to be, or at least they didn't used to be until we became successful, and everybody follows us, and publish large number of journals on obscure areas of cinema studies. What happened if they have 7 subscribers? So what? I'll print 17 copies. I'll give the 7 copies to the subscribers, I give the rest to the contributors, etc. I can survive. But I couldn't have survived without digital printing, and I think that's significant from that. By the way, I couldn't have survived, let me just mention another thing, without aggregators either. Now, what are aggregators? Most of you are publishing already know. There are people like ProQuest and H.W. Wilson and EBSCO, who are our partners, who then take our stuff in electronic form, put it together with loads of other stuff, go out there, sell it. People wouldn't know that they're reading an article from an Intellect journal. They think as if they're reading an article from EBSCOhost, Academic Search Premier, or whatever. But they'll give me a portion of the money which keeps me going. It's like all those Polish factories who build wonderful washing machines for Whirlpool or Philips or whatever. You don't know that's actually being made in Poland. But having the opportunity of going through a bigger brand allows the smaller ones to build their arteries and become stronger. That would have not been possible without electronic publishing, because you couldn't have the aggregation process with paper, if that makes any sense to you. So that's yesterday's technology. That's the kind of thing that has been really good for us, for Intellect and for other people, and we are there. But all of that yesterday technology has given us the mileage that it can give us, and we are done with it, if you like. The web is not completely dead, but it's on its way out. So as publishers, rightly so, we want to have accompanying websites. What do we do? We do accompanying apps now. So today's technology is the kind of apps can change the content, you see, depending on your location or your user profile, etc. Would the academics want this? That's a big question. That's the one that I don't know the answer to. And that's the one that my team at Intellect are pestering me, saying, can they invest more money in this? You know, we have 3 app groups at Intellect. Tiny company, we're still within this tiny company, you have 3 app groups arguing for 3 different kinds of apps that we should be developing. Would academics want it? This is the kind of question that I want to ask. Because as I said, as owner of a company, your relationship is different. It's my money. Yeah? If I spend it on the app, then I don't have it to pay the school fees. It's a really dramatic choice in that. If I pay for another app, I don't have another holiday this year. The relationship becomes quite serious when it's your own money and not other people's money. Would academics want it? If they do want it, I'm happy to invest in. Now the question is, why academics publish? If we could figure out why they publish, then we could decide if what we give them is relevant to them. This is a straw poll that I took in one of my seminars with academics. I said, why do you want to publish? Well, we know that publishing is an integral part of physics. You're not a physicist if you don't write about your project so that other people can recreate that experiment. Publishing is an integral part of many things, including medicine, including technical stuff. It wasn't part of art and design, which is Intellect territory. But they need to publish. It's also part of critical evaluation of things. You allow people to discover if cold fusion actually works or not. If you don't have documentation about it, people claim it. But more importantly, it's part and parcel of the funding application round. If under the coalition government we have any money left to apply for, we still need publishing, but under the previous governments, it's been very important. It's part of distribution ideas, it's part of teaching, patent, credit, recognition of effort, feedback, quality assurance, self-satisfaction, good on CV, prestige, ego. We can make money out of articulating intellectual property rights, collaboration. Biggest use of it, with my students at least, is closure. If you've done a PhD, you want to publish it, put it to bed, move on. Without that closure, not just PhD students, but also academics, it's quite difficult to have this thing in your head all the time. You want to articulate it, write it up, publish it. Even if nobody reads it, at least it's out of your way, filed. Maybe you get around to reading it 3 years later when you have time and redo it. Maybe writing for an audience of 3. Yourself, your supervisor, and your external. That's good enough. That's academic publishing. So the question now is, if we are publishing for these kind of reasons, do we need to make it into a book or a journal? Is that the main vehicle that we have at Sage, at Oxford, at Intellect, mainly monographs and journal articles? What about seminar presentations? Can I just present what I want and it's over and done with? Well, you can't. Because even if you record it, that's not a permanent kind of presentation. It's temporarily not dependable. My own colleagues in art and design would rather have a solo exhibition in a famous gallery in London than write about it. And they feel that's a better way of doing it. But then again, except for a short interview and a catalogue, there isn't anything left to document that thing. You know, Kuhn talks about our cultural heritage being based on the fact that we have libraries. We archive our understanding of culture, we put it in libraries, so the next generation come along, read that, and build on that. If you don't do the same for our art heritage or our theatre heritage, where do we go? Yeah? theatre is an important part of Intellect's mission because it's underserved. Because people think, well, I'll just do the play and that's it. Well, if you could publish playtext, as Intellect does, then you can create a heritage of it. And it's cheaper to just publish the playtext than it is to do the play. There's a lot you can do with printing, publishing, and creative arts that up until now has not been exploited. And people say, well, I do a DVD of it, I do a video diary of it, I do a website, I do a blog. My argument is, and it's a personal one, I'm sure my esteemed colleagues may have different points of view, is that none of that does the trick for academic publishing. That's my argument. So, what's an academic publication? Well, the definition that I like, the definition that I subscribe to, the definition that I believe in, the definition that motivates me, is academic publications are archival repositories of verified knowledge. And it's not my saying, it's one that is used within quite a number of research papers. Other people may not share with that. It's archival. It has to last. You can't just put it there and 6 months later when somebody does a revamp of their website, it disappears. You've got to be able to show that it lasts. It has to be verified. It has to be peer reviewed. You can't just put it there saying, brilliant, I like to tell you about this. It has to be verified, and the process of verification is important. And unless you can provide these kind of things digitally, you're not going to be providing the academic publishing the way I like it to be, or the way I perceive it to be correct. And I'm happy for other people to disagree with me on that. The most critical thing is academic publishing is a process of mediation and conflict resolution. Academics would love to have an easy way out. Quick publication, not waiting in the publication line to be published in 6 months' time, a year's time, 2 years' time in an esteemed journal. Not be burdened by peer review process, which gives you, in their view, the same point of view consolidated. They want to be opening up new avenues of activity. It's a conflict. The refereeing process in the proposal or manuscript or whatever takes time, comes back with things you don't like, and you've got to live with it if you are following my kind of definition of verified knowledge. And then we go through the copy editing process. I admit that some academic presses have begun to become lax as far as copy editing is concerned, but copy editing is a significant part of what we have. It horrifies me when I see the copy editing bills coming through Intellect. Yeah. Every single bill is over £1,000. And imagine you're doing 73 journals, 3 issues a year, 50 books a year, and these bills are coming in around 1,000 each. And you say, where's my money going? It's going through commitment to excellence. And it's important. You don't get that commitment to excellence through self-publishing. You don't get that commitment to excellence through just shoving it under HTML and saying, well, I'll get around to correcting the spellings later on. You can't do what I used to do when I was at school. You can't get away. Well, I'll sort it out. But what I'm saying is, digital publishing sometimes encourages being relaxed about those quality standards, because you know you can get around to correcting it. But if you had to do the lithopress, you knew that as soon as you printed it, 1,000 copies are out there, you're not going to be able to go around with a little sticky tape and stick the corrections on there. You'd be very, 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 very careful. And that's why Intellect is committed to print, because print is the way that I can wave the club at my staff saying, you've got to get it right. I'm not going to reprint it, even though it's digital printing. And I think design and layout are important part of what we produce. And unfortunately, some authors don't like to fit into a house style. Yeah? a lot of my authors who are artists say form and content have to go along with each other, and therefore because my content is different, I want to change the form. As a house style, I can't do that easily. So there is this friction. There's a friction between the academic who wants to publish with an academic publisher and a publisher who wants to exert its quality standards. And that friction, in my view, is important. That friction is what adds value. Take it away and you take a major part of what academic publishing is. Well, of course, publishing houses do other things. We print, we put it online. In the case of Intellect, we use service provider Atipon to do the online bit. Some other people do it themselves. We market, we distribute, we sell, we collect money, we pay our bills, and every now and then, in some occasions, we even pay our authors or editors some money. They're not doing it for the money. That's another thing which is very, very, very important. Academic publishing is not done to get money from the publisher. It's done to establish your standing within your community so you get your promotion, you get your recognition, etc. This is not a channel to make money. And sometimes I feel people who want to duplicate academic publishing in digital form go after these kind of things. Yeah? Not the previous ones I was telling you, the friction. They run away from the friction because that's where the friction is. It's always easy to run away. And they go after the thing, well, actually, I can produce it on the web. I can market it through social media. I can collect money with PayPal. I can pay my bills through PayPal. And if I pay my editors, I can pay them PayPal. Yeah? There is a conception that all of what publishers do can be automated through the web. What I'm saying is the friction can't be automated. The commitment to excellence cannot be duplicated. The commitment of a dialogue between the publisher who comes in with a point of view and is forcing that point of view very forcefully, and the author who comes in with a point of view and forcing very forcefully, and that friction is a creative friction, cannot be duplicated. Just shove it on the internet and hope for the best. So, I said to you, Intellect is not immune to the app. Intellect is not immune to wanting to go with the flow because everybody else is at it. I have my iPad. I've had it since it arrived and I love it. And over the weekend I was frustrated because I couldn't make any changes to my PowerPoint presentations that I had. I had to go all the way to the office where I have an iMac with an Office to just make a couple of changes, etc. Anyway, Intellect, as I said, is now embracing today's technology, and I thought I'd share with you these things that we may or may not do, but as an offering. Top of our wish list is copy and paste with citation. As I said to you, we would love to have this copy and paste which is intelligent. That you copy and paste it in membership. Either we do it in our own app, or we work with some people who can do it, or we try and campaign for that, but it would be lovely, it would be great. And then it would be great for the bibliography to be automatically generated from the cut and paste. And then would it be nice if I could recreate my school newspaper magazine on the wall where the margin notes are shared? Could we have a situation where we can recreate the concept of a second-hand book that you pick up and you see all these other people's notes, all this highlighting thing? Yeah? At Intellect, we produce a lot of internal documentation. Every conference we go to, somebody who's gone there writes a conference report. Yeah? The rule is you only print one copy, and it goes around the office, and people write their comments on it, and you read other people's comments. And I'm the one who writes the comments first. So the report comes in, I write my reports, my comments on it, my reflections on it, and it goes through the staff. Yeah? You can't print two copies, because then you lose that sharing of commentary. Could we not do this on there? And maybe do private notes too. Why not? I'll come back to some more things in a minute. So as a company, we've had to say, what are the metrics for doing apps? What are the metrics that we will use to judge whether we should do something or not do something? These are my metrics. Private intellect metrics. Take it, discard it, whatever you want. Even within intellect, it may change. But to succeed, we need to offer fundamentally new experiences. We need to fulfill important new functions that customers value. In my view, intelligent cut and paste is a very simple example of something like that. It has to be cheaper or be free. Chris Anderson has the book, Free. I've read it 3 times, written my side notes, shared it with my main managers at the company. It's a significant part of it. People are used to free. It's going to be very difficult to change their mindset, to move from the free to the premium that he promotes or whatever. It has to be cheaper to originate and multiply for the publishers. Yeah? It has to be. At the moment, in my company, origination is no cheaper than we were doing the Litopress one. Still, the copy-editing bills are very high. Still, typesetting bills, even though they go to India to be typeset, are comparatively high. We still invest quite a lot in retypesetting what comes to us in the eye of the author as finished product in a Word file, etc. That has the digital impact. The multiply part, in some ways, it is changing. One of our main problems is quick reprints. Well, if you are digital, you have no reprint costs. It's just automatically reprinted. And I think it has to be better transportable. That's where the iPad comes in, that's where the iPhone comes in, until you get to the point where you can pick it up, or in my case, leave it by the side of the bed and read it. It's not going to be the same. So the delivery has to be different on the screen. We've got to take the screen to the people rather than people to the screen, as Chris Anderson mentions, which is in a sense going back all the way to taking the kids to read the wallpaper and taking the printed thing to the individuals. You've got to make that change. Some more possible applications. This is endless. There's a document at Intellect where we invited people to submit their ideas. To share an article, you can be able to customize what Intellect offers. You can combine our journals with other people's apps. What I want to argue is that this is all just the beginning of a new gold rush, in the same way as it was with the web. I don't want to take too much time. I'll come back to that. So, what about an Intellect app? Well, the possibilities are endless. But to do anything, we need to do in-depth research and make sure that we are realistic about the potential of technology. I have an inverse pyramid, which basically says, if you ask, and you're asking our authors and our journal editors, what do you want? They want a lot. What do they need is less of that. And what we can afford to give them is yet again further down. But actually, what would they use is even less than what we can afford them. They want one thing, but when it comes to doing, they still like their spreadsheets to do the list of journal articles that they're processing. They still like to go to a conference and collect articles while listening to the speaker than having an online forum, etc. They still want to do things differently than what we can enable them to do electronically. What am I doing for time?
You're coming to the conclusion.
Okay. The conclusion is here. I'm finished. I have an ad 4 slides of adverts for Intellect.
Run them through.
Run them through. That was the conclusion, basically, that we've got to be realistic. And not only I have to be realistic because it's my money, my staff need to be realistic because ultimately it's their money too. If you make a big mistake, in the long run, the potential for salary increases is diminishing. And the same with you guys who work for other people. If you make mistakes, in the short term, it's not your money, but in the long run, it is your own future you're risking. So Intellect, we have this byline, Publishers of Original Thinking, and the reason I want to do this is just tell you that we are not so arrogant as you think we are. All publishers publish original thinking, even those who are funded by pharmaceutical industry and by the legal profession, etc. Even an accounting discovery is an original idea. We should really say publishers of new kinds of original thinking. This is my apology that the marketing people shorten things. It's not a sense of arrogance. We are a little boutique publisher trying to serve a very small community of people in film, in theatre, in art and design. We don't have major ambitions to take over the territory that Oxford, Cambridge, Sage occupy. What is new? Well, we publish in colour. In most of our journals, you can have colour. Quite rare in some of the traditional publishers. I don't know why. Colour is not that expensive anymore. We value design as part of the process. Intellect journal covers, Intellect journals themselves are designed. It's great to see other publishers moving into our territory and publishing journals like ours, but they then send it to India and have it typeset all the same as if it was an STN journal. You can't really do that. If you are in art and humanities, if you're in art and design, if you're in film studies, you've got to make the form to match the content, and we are doing that as a publisher. We're reducing the friction on that level. Photo and picture essays, you see a lot of them in Intellect publications. We promote that. We are about reflection on creative practice. We have acknowledged that our audience is based on doing creative stuff, producing art, etc., and we understand that. We do that. We're also about reflection on time-based media, be it radio, be it film, be it theatre, etc. That's what's new about us. The technology part, we are actually quite conservative, as I hope I have made it clear in this talk. We are after a technology that can work, that can justify itself financially, and it's one that our intended audience, once we can afford it, most of all, are going to end up using it, rather than the wonderful excitement which I have among my staff of continuously thinking of these wonderful new apps. Thank you. Good luck to you.